In this video, I'm going to talk about how to add extra ingredients or other ingredients into your sourdough loaves. Just chuck it in. Hi, I'm Elaine from Foodbod Sourdough. Welcome back to my kitchen. In this video, we're talking about adding other ingredients into your loaves. So we make our lovely sourdough, we make our first few loaves of strong white bread flour, playing around with other flours maybe like in our previous video, and then you might want to start thinking about adding other things into your bread. Depends on what your tastes are, what you fancy, but it's really easy to add extra ingredients into your dough. So for example, here in front of me, I've got a loaf which is a straight white loaf, which I've added poppy seeds to. So we're just going to talk about the different way to add extra ingredients. And this could be seeds. Seeds is a great thing to add to your loaf. This could be seeds in your loaf. It could be seeds on the outside of your loaf. So we're going to look at both of those options. It could be spices, herbs. You could want to add maybe some honey to your loaf, maybe some oil to your loaf. We're also going to make a cheese and jalapeno loaf. Very nice. I'm going to show you a different way of filling that. But when it comes to what you might fancy putting in your dough, it all comes down to your tastes and flavours. And I would recommend playing around with it. Dried fruit is another great option. Cooked and cooled grains, absolutely fabulous in your doughs. So you'll see lots, excuse the dog making a noise, you'll see lots of these within my recipes of starting to play around with adding lots of things. And one of my biggest suggestions, my greatest advice when it comes to this is have a go. Whenever people say, oh, do you think I could add this? Do you think I could add that? My answer is always, yeah, give it a go. But just keep in mind, there's only so much that a dough can cope with. So something that you've got in my sourdough Bible on page 50, what you'll see is there's a list of suggestions of things that you can put and add to your dough, but talking about a maximum amount to do. So if you start to add excessive amounts of ingredients into your dough, it's not going to be able to hold them. It's not going to grow too much. I mean, to me, who cares? If you've created a loaf that you love, that's packed full of cheese and chilies, but it's spread a bit, it's not come out looking beautiful. Personally, I don't really care if you love it. But if you are trying to control the shape of your dough and still make sure that your dough is going to be able to hold it well enough, try not to go too overboard with how much you add in, which is why I've got this list in here, just to give you some kind of guidance. But also you can use my recipes as your guide. So if you can see I've got lots of recipes of seeds in, you can use that as your starting point. Lots of recipes of dried fruits. But I mean, I'm a big spice fan. Spices are a great one to add. There are only two ingredients to be aware of that might affect your dough. So cinnamon, if you add some ground cinnamon into your dough, it will slow it down, so it will affect how it proves. So it will be a much slower dough. It will get there, but it will take a lot longer to fully prove. The same if you've got fresh garlic. So they're the only two to be aware of that they can just delay or extend how long your dough will take to fully prove. They'll get there, but they will take a lot longer. So just keep that in mind. And I, again, have those things written in my books. You know, garlic's great to add. If you add some roasted garlic, absolutely fabulous. And that won't be a problem. If you add dried garlic, that won't be a problem. But as soon as you use fresh, then it's a problem. And cinnamon are great. Again, great. It's a great addition to your dough. Works perfectly if you've got it in a mixed spice mix. If you're adding it, say, with some apple or fruit or something else, just keep in mind it's going to make a difference. Also keep in mind if you're adding wet things to your dough, that they are going to then change the consistency of your dough. So there's two different ways of doing this. There's the very simple and easy, chuck it all in. Chuck it right in from the beginning. And when I say that, I mean it. When you first mix up your dough, just chuck the stuff in from the beginning. Chuck in your seeds, chuck in your cheese, chuck in whatever you fancy. Makes it really, really easy. There's nothing you need to do more than that. And you'll feel the seeds in your dough or whatever you're adding as you start to work with it. You can just stretch and pull the dough around whatever additions you've added. Seeds, people often ask the question, do you soak them beforehand? No, I do not. You do not need to pre-soak them. Same with dried fruit, don't pre-soak it. If you do, you're adding a whole lot more water to your dough as well. If I have felt that by adding these extras that the dough has needed a little bit of extra water, I've added it to my recipes. So use them as your basis, makes life a lot easier. The other way of adding extra ingredients is to laminate your dough, and that is to stretch the dough out, cover it in the fillings and roll it up. And I'm going to do that with my cheese and jalapeno recipe that's in my sourdough Bible, so that you can see how we do that as an alternative to just chucking it in. So we're also going to look at adding a seeded crust to the loaf. So I'm going to get some doughs in front of me and show you a couple of different ways of working with them. So this, the other thing to keep in mind, when you add seeds or you add grains, sourdough really likes it. So you often get a really nice big loaf, which you'll see as well, because sourdough really enjoys that added extra. So let's play with some dough. So here we are. In front of me, I have got a bowl of my standard master recipe in process. So we've got 50 grams of starter, 350 grams of water, 500 grams of strong white bread flour, and then your salt to taste. And literally, I'm going to show you what I mean about the chuck it in. All you need to do when you're adding your seeds, dried fruit, pretty much anything, if you want to go down this route, is literally just chuck it in. So that has been 50 grams of those seeds. Just add it in. Stir it through, absolutely fine. So when you've got a chunkier added ingredients that you're putting in, you will be feeling them through the dough as you're stirring it, but they will mix through. So just literally throw it in. And the question that will come up about chia seeds, because chia seeds often are soaked and can soak up water. Again, I don't bother soaking them. I just chuck them in the same way. And they can be really useful, actually. If you've got a soft loaf or a loaf that you feel it's got too much water in it, that you're worried about how it's going to turn out, they can be really useful for just chucking them in your dough. So this is just our standard master recipe dough, rough first mix, and as you work it through, you'll just feel them in the mix. So as if by magic, here's one I made earlier. So this is what that dough is going to end up looking like. You can see, lovely and speckly. I'm going to pull that one into a banneton so that you can just see how it behaves. And then with this one, just as a bit of something different, this dough is a mix of strong white bread flour and wholemeal spelt flour, and we're going to add a seeded crust onto that one, just to show you something different. So, excuse me whilst I grab bannetons. So we'll come back to that one. I'll keep working with that one and doing all the things that I do with it to make it to the dough we need. So whereas with this one, so this is our fully proofed dough. I need my rice flour. I keep forgetting where I've put everything. So just going to put a tiny bit of extra rice flour into our banneton. And what you will see with your added seeds is you've got a nice firm dough. Look at that. And when you've got added ingredients in there, it's very, very easy to still pull your dough up and over the ingredients. You usually find, even if you've got something, a heavier, a bigger added ingredients, you just pull the dough and it kind of coats it. You'll be able to pull it around whatever you've added in. That comes into a nice, easy ball. And there's your nice, beautifully studded poppy seed dough. I never put poppy seeds on the outside of doughs because they're a bugger. They get everywhere in the kitchen, especially when you come to slice it. So I always put my poppy seed inside doughs. That one's going to go in the banneton. Little sprinkle of rice flour over the top. And that needs to go into the fridge to prove again. So that is our seeded dough going into its banneton. So because I've run out of those bannetons, which is what I'd prefer to use, we're just going to go back to a cane one briefly for this one. You don't need the cane ones. This size works perfectly. And what we're going to do is we're going to add the seeded crust. So this works nicely with, I'm going to use sunflower seeds, pumpkin seeds, it works well. It works just as well with oats. So all we're going to do is have the seeds in another bowl. None of this spraying the dough with stuff, you don't need to do any of that. Going to pull the dough into a ball. So we're doing our usual thing of pulling the dough into a ball, bursting bubbles as we go, which is good. And all I'm going to do with this is roll it in the seeds. So I'm going to push it into the seeds. See how they stick? We're going to put the sides in. So we've got a nice layer of seeds. Going to place that in the banneton and then sprinkle and push the extra seeds onto it. And what happens as the dough proves and fills the banneton, it sticks the seeds to the dough basically. So any moisture that's coming out of the dough, absolutely perfect because it's helping the seeds to stick. And what you'll see when we turn this out is you'll see where they've all beautifully stuck. Now what you're going to see when I turn one out to show you later is I had it in the other banneton because I've made two different doughs. But you'll see exactly how it works. One of the other beauties actually of putting a crust on it is you don't really need the rice flour in the banneton because it gives you that layer and it stops it from sticking. But this works perfectly, like I said, with seeds, with oats. If you do it with oats, they roast beautifully as you cook it, as it bakes. The seeds get all roasted, so make sure you're using raw seeds. Don't use them already roasted because then they'll roast again and just become bitter. And there's nothing else you need to do other than that. Again, it's going to go in the fridge to prove again, and then I'll show you later how we turn it out and bake it. So let me get the next dough and we'll roll it and fill it. For this loaf and this dough, I'm going to show you the other way of adding extra ingredients to dough, which is called laminating. So I'm quite well known for the fact that I don't tend to take my dough out of the bowl. I do the whole thing in the bowl. This is the only time that I take it out, when I need to turn it out onto the counter. So we're going to just put some flour onto the counter. I'm just using rice flour. and I want to, this is my nice fully proofed dough. It's just 100% strong white bread flour, made in its usual way. Okay, and we're going to put this in an oval banneton. You could put it in a round banneton, you could put it in a loaf pan, you could do whatever you like with it. So all we want to do with this one is stretch the dough out. So I've already weighed out my extra ingredients. So I've got 200 grams of cheese, I've got various mixed cheeses, and I've grated this, or you can just cut it into small chunks. And I've got 100 grams of drained jalapeños they're from a jar, so they've got the liquid in. So all I've done is drain them, ready to go in. So we're not adding any extra moisture here. So the thing to remember is this dough is going to bounce back. Sometimes a really good thing to do is to find a bit that hasn't got any flour and just kind of stick it. Stick it to the counter, so that the rest of it you can play around and you can pull against it. So I want this as quite a long thin piece, because what I'm going to do is roll it up and put it in my oval banneton. So I'm trying to keep it as a long thin bit. Some of my other recipes we go into a rectangle and use this process to make filled rolls, which are lovely. So it's exactly the same process of stretching the dough and filling it. So I use that for my cinnamon rolls recipe, also in my sourdough Bible book, for my coil rolls, the snug rolls, anything like that. We're doing exactly the same thing. So the key thing is to try and get it an even thickness if you can. Try not to end up with any holes in the dough. Look at that. Beautiful, beautiful dough. So I could probably keep pulling it a bit, but you don't want to keep watching me do that. And then we're going to go on with the cheese. So I've got a mix here of red Leicester and some strong cheddar cheese. I like using the red Leicester because then the colour stands out a bit more, but you can use whatever cheese you fancy. Like I said, sometimes I do it with just cutting the cheese into chunks so that you've got bigger pieces of it. Obviously this time I've grated it, and then we're just going to go on with the jalapenos. So try and spread it evenly if you can. And like I said, I use exactly the same process for making my filled rolls. So we're doing exactly the same thing. And what you'll find in those recipes is it will tell you what size to pull the dough out into. Okay. And then all we want to do is roll it up. We're just going to roll it up. So if you think of lamination, lamination is the process that you would use when you're making something like croissants. Anything where there's layers is lamination. So this is what we're doing. And you could also make this exactly like the other one. You could chuck it all right in from the beginning. Just mix it up and stir it through, and that would also work perfectly. So you can do the two options. I'm just going to roll it up. So turning the top bit over and then putting it in. If you just try and pick it up and over a bit so that you are... I probably should have done this the other way, from this way to that way for the sake of the video, but it's a bit late now. James is going, yeah. So try not to stretch it too much as you roll him. And you'll get to a point where you can just pull that last bit over the top. Now that's stretched out a little bit on the side, so we're going to just give it a little push in. I've already put some extra rice flour in my banneton. Just going to lift it up. In it goes. We're going to cover that again to prove again, and then turn it out and bake it. So it's as simple as that. That is the lamination version of doing it. So, you know, again, like I said just now, you could easily just chuck that all in from the beginning and work it through like that. So there's different ways, and you'll see different methods with my different recipes of adding extras. But this one's now going to go into the fridge, and then we'll see what it looks like when we turn it out and bake one later. So here I've got 2 of the doughs that I'm going to show you turning them out and baking them. So we've got one that I made earlier. This is our filled cheese and jalapeno dough. It's going to bursting out of things. And this is our seed crusted loaf. So I'm going to turn these out into to bake. They've been sitting in the fridge for a while. So we'll see what actually happens with these, which could be quite interesting. So let's start off with our cheese and jalapeno dough. So because I've used this before, I'm just going to shake off some remains. And so we've got our paper over the top, into our pan. Here we go. So just going to give that a score, and we're going to see what it does. And it feels quite stiff because you've got all of the extras in there, but as soon as you start to cut into it, you can start to see, I don't know if you can see that, you can start to see some of the cheese and jalapenos starting to burst out of the side. So we'll see what that one does. Let's get that one out into the oven. James is currently rubbing his tummy. So we're into our cold oven. We've got the usual going on, 220 degrees centigrade or 425 degrees Fahrenheit for your convection, your fan assisted oven, in there for 55 minutes. Now, because you've got all these added extra ingredients, we will see how it is when it comes out. It may need a little bit extra, okay? So allow for that. So this one, this is our seed crusted loaf. And this has grown a bit. So you can see, even though it's a smaller dough, it's filled the banneton. So we've got our paper over the top. And because this is a slightly smaller pan than the actual banneton, I'm not going to be able to turn it out in my usual way. So all I'm going to do is turn it onto the counter and lift that in. So you can see all of those lovely seeds. And now we still want to try and score it. You could bake it like that and see what it does. You can always bake a loaf without scoring it if you fancy. But ideally we want to score into this a bit. So you can just start to cut through some of the seeds. Often the seeds have softened up a bit from sitting in the banneton and the moisture. But you see how well they've stuck? That's because of the process we used for adding them. So let's get that one in to the oven as well. And we will see how they do later. I'm now going to get the baked loaves out of the oven so that you can see the loaf with the seeded crust and the cheese and jalapeno loaf. I apologise because I put the dishwasher on, which is the whirring sound you can hear in the background, which James is not very happy about. So here we go. Here is our little seeded crust loaf. Look at that. This one was a real grower. It has really filled the pan. But look at that. Look at the seeds, how the seeds have stayed on. So what we're going to try and do is use the paper to get it out of the pan. Look at that. It's almost like I've done it before. And what you should be able to see, oh, it's a good job I've got nails, is look at that. Look at the seeds, how they've all stayed on. So that is our little, look at all that, seed crusted loaf. And like I said, actually, you could have got away with not actually putting any rice flour in the banneton, so you wouldn't have had this coating on it. There's a couple of seeds that have come off in the bottom of the paper, but that just means that you get some chef's perks when they've cooled down a bit. And then the other one we're going to take out is our cheese and jalapeno loaf. So this is our loaf that we stretched and rolled and filled. Look at that, baby! Look at that. Well, we can absolutely tell you that smells amazing. James is hoping and praying it's going to come home with him. Look at that. That's a beauty. And that has filled the pan. So, do you know, I'm not going to stick my fingers in that one to try and pull it out. I'm going to use my trusty tongs to grab hold of the paper to be able to slide this out. Oh my. Look at that. Look at that. How good does that look? So, this shows you, with the gurgling behind me, of the sink. So, that was our poppy seed loaf. So that's got the seeds in the loaf. Whereas this one has got the seeds on the outside. And actually, in my new book, I've got a recipe that's got seeds inside and out. So there's nothing to say you can't do both. This is our cheese and jalapeno loaf. Oh, smells amazing. So hopefully what you're seeing from this video is just how easy it is to add extra ingredients to your loaves. Remember the tips, try not to overload it too much. Go down the absolute simplest route and just add everything from the start. Just chuck it right in from the beginning. See what you fancy, see what flavours you fancy. You might even want to just start with a couple of tablespoons of some caraway seeds. You know, you might want to start with just a small handful of some nuts you like. If you put walnuts in your dough, there's an interaction between the dough and the iron in the walnuts that means that you get like little pinkish greyish streaks that come from the nuts. So it's, you know, play around with things and see what you can produce. Keep in mind what I said about the cinnamon will just slow things down. Garlic will slow things down. But other than that, just have a play. Have a play around with things. And oh, it smells amazing. How good does that look? I mean, it's just like a wide open mouth of cheese and jalapeno. What do you reckon, James?
No.
How much do you love me?
All too much.
So, we hope you've enjoyed this video. We will be back again for more. But for now, happy baking, have fun, and just play around. Thank you for watching.